So as Vincent said, I'm Diwakar Rai from Thai Bold Nixdorf. It's actually D-Bold Nixdorf. Not condescending you, Vincent. Imagine doing that mistake in your interview. So you are still fine. Thank you so much. Uh, we have an interesting topic today, which is borderline trust, governance, and compliance for GCCs. Now, borderline trust is a stressed word in this topic, and you will come to know why. And there will be quite some focus areas which we'll go through. Normally, governance and compliance hurts us every day. And you can imagine this when we go through the audit cycles, right? But what we don't realize that it pains when it matters the most. We recently had a very horrific accident of AI 171 in Ahmedabad. And for sure, there were elements of governance and compliances which was missed, which caused that accident. Now, it is not yet to be ascertained that whether it is a data governance or compliance, but still there was a miss in governance and compliance. And frankly speaking, this is where this topic becomes so important for us. And what we will take home from our GCC leaders here is primarily about the proven framework, process orchestration techniques, and also the technology enablers that can help with our security, privacy, and also the auditability of our offerings and systems. Getting straight into the topic, Praveen, I will start with you. Now, governance and compliance we treat. So, how can GCCs really embed governance into their operating model? Because it has to be part of their DNA, right, in order to run the show in terms of governance and compliance, Praveen.
Yeah, so I think I'll share a couple of anecdotes from my experience so far. So I have had the privilege to work on the side of the GCCs with some of the largest banks in the world where compliance was a massive kind of a requirement. And not just that, it was quite reactive in nature, to be honest. And then now, from a system integrator standpoint, I have the ability to look at how other industries are also looking and solving this particular challenge. So from an operating model perspective, I see the last 2-3 years has been a kind of a very directional change in the way this has been approached. And in my experience, and I can just highlight one of the examples that was one of the largest banks in UK. Again, this happened about 8 or 9 years back. It was the holiday season around Christmas. So typically, as we know, after 15th of December, we usually have a code freeze. Nothing goes in. But then that's a window period for the technology people to actually try out a few things. Whether they are innovating something. There's a little bit of bandwidth in terms of what and how can be done in order to maybe bring in some improvements. And as part of that, they were doing a stress testing on the UK servers for this largest bank in the UK. And they, by mistake, actually it was an honest mistake from one of the developers, but because of the compliance requirements being so weak at that particular point in time, because there was so much emphasis in kind of driving the digital strategy, that he ended up pointing a stop check stress testing request onto the production server. And that kind of like brought down the entire system during the peak holiday season. I think the result was pretty obvious. We got a mail the next day that our digital head was moving to pursue further opportunities. And it resulted in heavy fines, obviously loss of face for the bank. And that resulted in a massive amount of change in terms of how compliance is being viewed. Now, this is one organization, but in my view, I've seen that it's not just one bank or one organization. Compliance is now becoming a kind of a fulcrum in order to speed up the innovation within organizations. Because if you are able to ensure that those checks are in place, your ability to innovate from a technology standpoint goes a lot higher. So it's like having what I used to see the cops series earlier, where your cops always have to have the faster car. Because if they're not, they will force the manufacturers to make a slower car. And that's not good for innovation.
But Means what you're also highlighting is it is no more a liability function. It is more strategic and a value creation function for us in terms of compliances. Munish, would you like to add something in terms of how can we embed this into the DNA of our organization in GCCs?
Yep. First of all, it's great to be here. First time in Goa for work. First time went to bed at 11 in Goa. So a lot of firsts. So look, I represent Genpact. So I have a perspective of a third party. Though Harpreet did say yesterday that we were the first GCCs. So I want to establish the need for why do we need to get this right? This is 7% of India's GDP, right? And if there is a single incident, it can be damaging not only to the company but also to the industry as such. And especially from a third-party perspective, a lot of our clients have trusted us with their processes, which is, I think the risk is a lot more accentuated in the context of a third party. And as I was thinking about this, I think there are about 10 things that go into the compliance. And I think as far as the infra is concerned, people are concerned, the operations, SOP, process maps, quality checks, the IT systems where you have email monitoring, etc. I won't talk about those, but given that the representation in this room is largely GCCs, I want to just talk about 5 things. So what we've done over a period of time is, given that there are 140,000 people in Genpact who are doing a variety of transactions, I think it's important to just take a look at what are the top 10 transactions that they are processing can actually bring you down on your knees and putting a very acute and a sharp lens on managing those top risks. I think that's one thing I had to say. The second is, I don't know if you guys are experiencing it, but we made all onboardings in person now. Because all the remote onboardings, they actually create risk because you don't know there's identity theft and who's getting onboarded. So I think that's something you want to consider. The third is, because we've got the benefit of working with, over 700 customers across different industries, it's given us that unique ability to come up with common minimum practices and benchmarks, and we kind of embed those across the process maps, and as we design standard operating procedures, and that helps us de-risk that. So you want to consider that. And finally, integrity, right? I mean, that's in our values. It's zero tolerance. Anybody who messes with that, we take strict action. I don't know if you want me, did you want me to comment on the innovation part as well?
We have a question on innovation.
All right, cool.
So we'll
Thanks.
cover,
Thank you.
On innovation. Rather, next question to you. Regarding the strong governance, we normally see it as a bureaucratic process. Do you think it can accelerate the innovation and speed to market for GCCs?
Yeah, so in my view, it's a part and parcel of innovation process. It's not anymore a choice. And also, how do you define the speed of innovation? So I'm from Whirlpool, representing a manufacturing company. Let me give that perspective as well here. So it's truly defining what is speed of innovation. And so you can have a great speed, go to the market, and then day after you have a data breach. Or you have a privacy issue, then you're back to square one. So I can give you an example from my earlier company where we were making medical products, and it was designed in one location in one part of the world. And it was rolled out to markets across the globe. And what we saw after a month is, and it's a connected products, and it becomes very important when you have connected products. What we saw is that this system from the hospital was pinging to the server in the location where it was designed. So we had to roll back the whole release. So you're back to square one. So my point is that there is no choice. It's really part and parcel of the innovation. And then it's up to us, how do we define the speed of innovation? To really have a sustainable innovation and a success in the market, you need to have this part of the process.
Munish, would you like to add something on the innovation part in this then?
Sorry, say again?
Would you like to add on the innovation part which you wanted to add in the previous question? Yeah.
Yeah, I think as we reflect on, so the topic is obviously trust, right? And it's all about data and governance. But I think it's also about how we are beginning to use elements of data to create more value. So for example, in financial crime, right? There is transaction monitoring, there's sanction screening, and there are a variety of things that we're doing as part of that. Now we are able to use a lot of the data and build algorithms that is actually helping us flag erroneous or fraudulent transactions upfront. So I think we've been able to use that on accounts payable, for example. Again, building algorithms that help you make sure there are no duplicate payments, make sure that the discount captures happen on time. I think it's coming. And then customer service, contact centers. Typically, companies would end up monitoring 3 to 5%, but now with technology, you're able to monitor, you can do speech to text, you can monitor 100% of the transactions. They can also help you run compliant operations because now you have the ability to actually scan through all the 100 calls, 100% of the calls, and your ability to drive impact. And the last comment I'll make is on, we've also created a lot of AI first or prediction models that can actually predict as the associate is transacting, is it likely to create an error? And what's the predicted quality of that transaction? So I think a lot of these technologies and innovations are actually enabling us to, and this is not about data governance, right? This is all about how you are creating transactions, managing your standard operating procedures, handling the data that helps you create a bigger impact, and that has an innovation lens to that. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Manish. Shiva, next question to you, and probably what I'm now doing is also adding the complexity layer in this governance thing. So, how do we go about designing governance model where we have multiple regulatory regimes? We have GDPR in Europe, DPDP in India, then you have to deal with insurance regulations, banking regulations, telecom regulations. And is it even realistic to have a single compliance architecture? And obviously, we cannot make it overly complex because we have multiple regimes. So, your thoughts, Shiva, on this?
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think it couldn't have been a more appropriate time, not just sitting on the dais, but we are all speaking about compliance and how compliance can be a strategic foundation, not just for GCCs, but for the global organizations. Designing a compliance strategy and framework where you have multitude of regulatory compliance, whether it is CIPA, whether it is GDTA or CCPA, what have you, requires a very balanced and principle-based approach. What is the foundation for your data strategy, framework, and governance going to look like? What are the core principles? For different industries, it would be different, but I touch upon some of the key aspects of what those principles that most governance frameworks should follow and adapt. Fair and unlawful processing of the transactions of whatever you process. Data minimization. You're collecting vast amounts of data, but are only storing what is truly required, right? That's data minimization, simply put. And then, of course, purposeful limitation of data consumption, right? I have my view, but again, this is personal. But today, if you see, you may have multiple relationships with a bank or anything that you consume from different organizations. Every new product that you would sign up for requires you to either do a KYC or submit documents. Of course, there are some governing rules around it, but from a technology standpoint, from a framework standpoint, can that be minimized? Which not only stabilizes and strengthens the foundation of framework, but also enables the user experience. Two, I think you also have to have the framework in such a manner where you're tackling the base controls at a base level, right? Some of the strictest of the regulations that you have, and then also you are tackling some of them at an overlay level, right? That's very, very important. And then most organizations or teams, they classify the data based on the regulatory requirements as opposed to classifying the data based on the data type. For example, HSI, PII, non-sensitive data, right? It's very important to have the tiered approach where tier 1 is all your HSI data, PII data. Tier 2 could be personal data but non-sensitive. Tier 3 could be common data, unregulated data. That is very, very important. I can go on and on. I think fundamentally the strategy and framework requires organizations to have a data culture mindset, a mindset where data is seen as an enterprise asset, right? Irrespective of whether you as an individual or an organization, team, contribute it or consume it. And to address your second part of the question, which is it possible to have a single framework that can fit all, like one size fits all? I don't think so. I think you need to have a multi-regulatory and compliance framework. Organizations have done that mistake of having that single framework. Today, I think I can talk about most of the companies, and those of you in BFSI can relate to it. We are spending millions and millions of dollars on regulatory and risk, of course, risk and control environment initiatives. Part of my role often is wrestling with the business partners why we have to spend 60-70% of the dollars in these initiatives as opposed to business deliverables. That's because now we have to adapt. There's more regulatory thing coming, and you got to have sometimes the region-specific control structures, compliance structures. Sometimes you have global, and defining that right mix is the key to establishing a scalable data governance and framework.
Radha, would you like to add, because I know he did mention that singular framework is a bit of a difficulty, but what is your thoughts?
Yeah, so let me build on what Shiva mentioned. So you can have a global architecture which is sort of common, but it has to be modular so that you can bring in the aspects of different regions or countries. And for companies like us, we need to take care of the regulation from a fiscal, finance, other regulation to run the company, but also the regulations from the product perspective. So it's a blend of technology centers across the globe plus the business centers across the globe. So you also need to ensure that how these different systems are interacting with each other. So in my view, it can be global architecture, but it has to be modular where we can give the granularity of the requirements from different regions.
Let me add another layer of complexity there, which is pertaining to the tech stack. So you dealt with the regulatory regimes across the globe, but we also have cloud, hybrid, and then the legacy tech stack. How can we have consistent governance across these technical stacks?
No, this is a pretty complex problem, and for companies which has been there for many years, so my company, Whirlpool, is more than 15 years old. So you definitely have these legacies. You have the tech stack from the past, and then you have made an evolution. Now it is changing very rapidly. So in my view, two aspects. One is process, and the other one is technology. Because some of the things we may not be able to address with technology if the systems is too legacy tech stack. So there we need to ensure that we have process and ensure that people are trained and are able to manage it. The other one is technology. And so how can we connect these legacy systems with the new systems, with cloud or AI or Gen AI, and have a clear plan to migrate it. So you cannot leave the legacy systems for long. We need to have a clear plan to migrate it. And there, my advice is to do step by step so that you don't go a big bang and then mess up everything. So it's a part of our life where we need to deal with it, and it has to be managed with the process and technology together.
Praveen, would you like to add on to what Radha said? And let me also add another flavor to this question. Mic is definitely a problem. Yeah. So let me add another flavor to this question in the same breath. I don't think the GCC story can be complete without AI and automation, right?
Yeah.
So how Radha mentioned about technology aspects and the process aspects, but from the AI and automation perspective, how can we make sure that data classification and detecting of anomalies can be made easier using AI and as well as automation overall?
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky, like in the last 1 year, I've been part of a company, EPAM, which is an AI-first company. So my entire experience earlier was Because on the banking side, I was about a lot about processes, a lot about controls, a lot about ensuring you are de-risking the bank from any sort of litigation that may happen. At the same time, you have to make sure that the business continues and transformation is being done within the realm of that. But now, from what I know, there are X number of things that I would have done differently had I been in the position that I was in, and that is what I recommend now to all the GCC leaders that I meet and have the opportunity to talk about. I think to Shiva's point, sorting your data is going to be one of the first challenges, right? So I typically never suggest that jump onto an AI, Gen AI solution where you have a situation where your data sources are so fragmented that you are unable to determine what your source of truth is. So first point is to understand the truthfulness of your data so that your AI, whatever output it generates, can be doing that on a trusted source of data. So that's number one. Secondly, do you have enough inputs in terms of tracking down your data lineage? For example, if there is an data attribute that filters in, which is into your PII information, and that is something which is going to be critical. What are the applications and what is the rating of those applications? Is it a tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, and what sort of an infra it is hosted on? I think you need to have some level of understanding. So this is to me, and at an enterprise level, some of the base foundational things that on top of which, if you have generative AI capabilities, you can do wonders with getting actionable insights. Now, from a compliance standpoint itself, let me again highlight an example. So we had a requirement for POM surveillance, right? So for whatever trades that particular happen, you have to ensure that, no insider information is essentially linked, no trade secrets are essentially out, or, regarding buy and purchase. And as bankers, you are not even supposed, you have to declare every single, share that you are essentially purchasing. And as part of it, you essentially have some agents deployed on your mobile phone. But how do they work? In the traditional world, 2 years back or 3 years back, before the disruption happened of Gen AI, the way we used to do it is, it used to take the messages that is being sent by the traders or whoever and into a central server. The central server used to then use an AI ML model to essentially build some sort of a context on what is that conversation all about. Is it something which is sensitive? Is it something which could which is not supposed to have, and then red flag something which would then go to the operations team, and the operations team would then validate whether what has been flagged by the ML model is essentially right or not. But this required a massive setup, and it became pretty much of a lagout because imagine the amount of logs. You are basically looking at the messages, and there was a hack to it. Instead of sending one single message, people used to send every word as a separate message. And then the servers were, they used to struggle in terms of building the context. But now with the help of NLP models, and believe me, the models are getting smaller, the GPUs are getting more powerful, right? So the technology proliferation is happening at a much rapid pace. Even when I was joining, EPAM as a CTO, it was very different than what the things that I see right now. I mean, I have certain specific models that I'm using for doing my pilots and POCs, which are deployable on my laptop. So you have a situation wherein now, every organization, because compliance requirements for GDPR and other areas more or less are the same, payments. So you can essentially create on-prem data center hosted specific models that you could then use NLP models to essentially build this context that you were having, very heavy kind of applications to stitch together what your compliance requirements are. So it's a game changer for me. If I look at what was existing versus what I have on the fore right now, I think AI and automation is something, if you don't do it, people are anyways doing it. Your competitors will start getting the advantage ahead of you. So I don't think you have a choice anymore.
So with that, let me also put a futuristic hat for you folks, and it can be yes and no answer. Do you think the predictive compliance models can replace the reactive audit cycles which we have currently?
I'll just continue on that. So while we are moving ahead on the agentic AI flow, where you have autonomous agents, still going ahead and building some level of autonomous decision making and reasoning capabilities, I don't think it's at a stage where you can trust the explainability part of it in a lot of industries, especially like healthcare, life sciences, and even BFSI. So I think it's going to be a mix of both. So there is going to be a human in the loop. There is going to be reinforced learning with human feedback. That is going to happen with these models, so that you have a 4-eye, 8-eye check. So while the models do whatever they need to do to give you the speed, but some bit of the control will still be with the specialists who are SMEs, because the real scenarios on the GCC on compliance and are fairly complex, and models are not there yet. They're learning, and we may get there at them, but I don't think today we are at that stage where agentic AI can completely be in a proactive manner.
You just saved many jobs, so to say. Yeah, Munish.
I was sharing with Harpreet, I don't know if he mentioned it in his keynote or not. But when you think about the first revolution, right, that was all about how do you maximize your muscle power. The advent of tractors, steam engines, and manufacturing, all of that, right? So that was the first one. The second revolution was all about how do you maximize the brain power. And we kind of went through that. Where we are today with AI, it's all about how do you maximize the imagination power, right? So I think this thing around one versus the other, human in the loop, over the loop, and wherever in the loop, right? I think, we headed there, but it's all about how you're now leveraging technology and AI to create superior outcomes and help you unlock all that you imagined, right? So I won't take a binary view to either or on that.
So just on that thought, but are GCCs really investing into the talent in order to address these aspects of technology and governance overall?
Yeah, look, I haven't worked with the GCC except for Genpact, but my last 19 years have been more in a third-party environment. What's very clear is that GCCs have completely changed from a cost function to a value creation function. There's extreme amount of complex work happening. Everybody is driving, RPA, automation, AI. I think everybody's out there. So I think the question is that, as you deal with the complexity in the GCC, right? How do you dig into the benchmarks? So, for example, when we work with, let's say, I run financial services, so I have the ability to have benchmarks for, let's say, credit card origination or mortgages or business banking or time to report, blah, 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 for 15 clients, and I'm able to create benchmarks. And I'm able to help clients understand where they are against the best in class. So I think the GCCs are in the journey. My advice would be to leverage partnerships, get access to common minimum practices, to get access to benchmarks, right? That helps you really unlock value.
So would you like to add on the operating model perspective as well when we are managing this talent pool and the technology and the governance aspect?
Yeah, so let's all admit it, right? We are in the VUCA world. The Gen Y, Gen Z is the generation of the talent that's coming into the industry. For them, regulatory compliance is boring, right? Of course, our L&D teams, the trainings that we provide, we're doing a great job in gamifying it, in making them really understand. There are workshops that are being done. So while we tackle the training part of it in terms of making people early on, whether it's operations or IT, the teams that handle the data, it is also important that we have frameworks, tools, leverage AI to kind of support that. The part with especially what is going to be critical for GCCs is, yes, you have all your partners working on critical systems, handling HSI, PA, data, train, but are they actually making sure that there are no vulnerabilities, that it is not misused? That is where we have audits. So there's more focus on these audits, compliance. And I think to the question around how we are leveraging AI is, of course, it helps the traceability of where the particular vulnerability or incident may have happened. How are you leveraging, and fine-tuning your experiences and putting the control mechanisms per se? That is going to be key. And I think to answer your question, would we continue to be reactive, or can we have some proactive mechanisms? I think it's like saying, you know what, I have solved all production stability problems. From tomorrow onwards, we are not going to have any incidents. It is somewhat like that. But what I can tell you is, with some of these mechanisms, we can detect at a stage 1 as opposed to a stage 4.
Very good. rather final thoughts on this, please, about how do we stay ahead of the regulatory compliances. We need to take regulators and our growth story also together, right? We need to convince regulators also.
Yeah, so the way I would answer is currently India is the GCC capital. How do you retain that position even in future? This is one of the area where you have to be ahead of the curve and bring that, the technology advancement to the business side, that is in this case, governance and compliance, so that you are ahead always. And so that's how you stay relevant as the GCC capital. So that's how I would position it.
Thank you so much for all the thoughts on governance and compliance. And I think it is quite some takeaways for us. One of the takeaway definitely I am taking home is this is a big opportunity. And definitely it is not a tick in the box. It can be a strategic differentiator. In fact, one thing which we can start off is compliance as a service, which can not only benefit the GCC, but also add into our revenue stream. So thank you very much for your suggestions, information, and thank you audience for your time. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.